Hello and welcome to episode 202 of the Notcast. Today I am talking about R.E.M's 13th studio album released in 2004. It is Around the Sun, as well as the compilation album In Time that was released around about the same time, and the Around the Sun World Tour. To be short and sweet, Around the Sun is my least favourite R.E.M album. In a world where you can be anything, I don't understand quite why you'd want to be boring, but that is what R.E.M did with this record. This record is 55 minutes, 16 seconds of unexciting music. It feels like it lasts about 3 years. This Notcast will be shorter than the album. Hopefully it won't feel like it lasts 3 years, but it might do. If it does, really sorry about that. We have to start the story by talking about the album's somewhat unusual birth. Is that R.E.M were in the studio recording material for their then untitled 13th studio album, and then I think Warner Brothers made the decision, or maybe invoked the greatest hits clause in the contract which R.E.M had signed. And as we know from the rest of R.E.M's career, they're like AC/DC. They are a band that does what they set out to do. The R.E.M have signed a contract and they said they're going to do something, they're going to do it. It's part of, I think, a working class work ethic, which AC/DC have definitely got, R.E.M have definitely got as well. You know, they fulfilled what they agreed to do, and one of those was to have, you know, a compilation album. After perhaps the lackluster sales and critical reception of Reveal, possibly my second, the second from worst R.E.M studio album. Warner Brothers decided that perhaps having invested a large amount of money in the band's publishing deal and their new record contract, that perhaps a greatest hits album was something that they ought to do. So R.E.M had the dilemma of being pulled out of the recording studio, having to finish off a couple of songs and put them onto the greatest hits album In Time, 1988 to 2003, that was released in the summer of 2003. Now, just immediately preceding that, and taken from the sessions that became part of In Time and Around the Sun, R.E.M released their traditional Christmas single. Here is the 2002 Christmas single. It's just the CD here, and a picture of the three of them on there, which I believe is a cover of No Matter What, which I think is a Big Star song, and the song Jesus Christ, which I think was also covered by U2. This is part of the fan club package for 2002. I wasn't a member of the R.E.M fan club in 2002. One of my regrets is I should have been. I really should have been, because now I'm looking at them and going, God, I wish I bought those. It would have been £10. But there you are. As is the case with a lot of R.E.M fan club singles, if it's a new studio recording, it's generally Mike Mills singing a somewhat anodyne, airy cover version that was popular on rock radio in the 70s and maybe in the 80s as well. In fact, I can't recall, many Michael Stipe lead vocals on those Christmas singles. They almost all were Mike Mills towards the end. Silver Bells, Jesus Christ, No Matter What, those type of things. This also, by the way, has on the CD-ROM part of it. Does anyone remember CD-ROMs? If you do, you're old. On the CD-ROM part of it was, I think, Michael Stipe reading from a speech by Martin Luther King, the text of which is included, I think, on the sleeve. At least I think here's this version. After a while, they all started to become much of a muchness. And so, therefore, the band announced that they were going to release their first official compilation album of the Warner Brothers era, which was called In Time, the best of R.E.M, 1988 to 2003. And they were going to follow it up with some live shows. But they followed up the live shows, or more correctly, they preceded the live shows with the first single from the greatest hits record, an R.E.M song called Bad Day, which was released on 2 CDs and a 7-inch. I don't have the 7-inch because I wasn't buying vinyl. I was living in a small flat at the time and I was limited by money, space and time. And Bad Day, for those of you who don't know, is a re-recorded and rearranged version of a demo from 1986, which was called PSA, which stood for Public Service Announcement. And PSA is released on, I think, it might be the Life Switch Pageant reissue. And effectively, Bad Day is kind of like a rewrite stroke spiritual sequel stroke equal of It's the End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine. It follows a very similar approach. It follows a very similar musical template. It has the same kind of galloping drum sounds and the punctuated drum elements, which, if you remember, It's the End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine. It has lots of sections where everything drops out and the drums come in, or perhaps just the vocals come in. Bad Day follows pretty much the same template as that. So It's the End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine, Part 2, updated for the 2003 edition. And it's perhaps not coincidental that Bad Day was the first R.E.M. original that was released after the September 11th attacks in 2001, which really affected, I think, the band. I mean, Michael Stipe lived in New York. He may have been in town at the time that happened. But obviously it's the kind of thing that is absolutely unforgettable, traumatic, and changes your approach to a number of things and change the world. I don't think we would have got Trump elected if it hadn't been for 9/11. But Bad Day is kind of the first R.E.M. song that really recognises that, and actually the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks is a thing that runs all through a number of the songs that are on Around the Sun. So Bad Day is, in my opinion, one of the very best R.E.M. singles, and the rewriters really kind of tightened it up and taken it from a pretty good R.E.M. demo to an R.E.M. classic. The single is backed with a number of extra tracks. So one CD single. This one, the better one of the two, has Favourite Writer, which is written by Linda Hopper and Ruthie Morris, whoever those are, and sung, I think, by Mike Mills, following on the tradition of the B-side cover versions. And it's one of the great B-sides of R.E.M.'s time. Undoubtedly, they recorded that and No Matter What and a number of other songs with the idea, well, maybe we'll put them on fan club singles, but actually this one's good enough to be a B-side. Also on the CD single front was the second CD, two CDs. This is a cover, well, it's not out in the country, and an instrumental track called Adagio. And with Adagio, for example, like a lot of R.E.M. songs, they had a lot of R.E.M. instrumentals. And the difference between a finished R.E.M. song and an unfinished R.E.M. song was Michael Stipe inspired enough to add vocals and melody to that particular song. Some of these songs you could hear and you could go, yeah, Michael Stipe just wasn't feeling the love that day. And some of the other songs which have come out around about the same time, maybe written by Peter Buck, that appeared on other artists, were basically R.E.M. instrumentals that Michael Stipe didn't feel inspired by, but the other people did, and they turned them into R.E.M. songs, or more correctly, other songs that could have been R.E.M. songs but didn't. This was then followed up with the band's compilation album, In Time, released around about June 2003. This is the CD DVD version of In Time, but I should probably show you, this is a deluxe edition of In Time that was released at the same time. It had some bonus tracks on it. It's got a number of B-sides on which haven't been reissued on any of the reissues. So it's got It's a Free World Baby, Stormy Kitten, Revolution, the old version of Leave, which you will know from the New Adventures in Hi-Fi, Why Not Smile, The Lifting, Beat a Drum, an instrumental called 2JN, which is pretty bad, and a live version of The One I Love and Country Feedback. And this comes in a lovely kind of transparent sleeve here with two parts in it. One is a kind of like a trifold CD set thingy, which you open, and then there's a poster, and there's another thing which has fallen out as well, and that's the CD, and then there's a thing advertising the DVD release, and the poster, by the way, is a photo that will be familiar and appears on a compilation release later on. And then you've got the book, which has Peter Buck talking about his favourite R.E.M. songs and describing his story around those. As a compilation, In Time is pretty good. I am a stickler for sequential, chronological greatest hits releases, compilation releases, so you can track the story of the band. Some bands don't do that. They arrange the songs by how good are they, which ones fit well. What kinds of listen? Sorry, pardon me. It's been a long day. What kind of listening experience do you have when listening to this? And In Time has 3 songs which haven't been on any other R.E.M. album so far. So 4 actually. It's got The Great Beyond from the Man on the Moon soundtrack. It's got Bad Day. It's got a new song called Animal, and it's got a recording of a track called All the Right Friends that was originally recorded by R.E.M. in demo form in around about 1981, 1982, but never made the cut. This was the first time that R.E.M were consciously, I think, looking backwards through their careers and making decisions around what did we used to be, what kind of legacy did we have, and although In Time is a contractual obligation, and it's Warner Brothers kind of admitting that R.E.M had a great future behind them. It's also, I think, a nice and tidy summation of the best of the band's imperial phase, which is the phrase which Neil Tennant uses to describe the band when they are bulletproof. Um, it's a good compilation album. It's really good. It's probably really cheap, and you can see it in lots of charity shops. But it's a good compilation. This is the 2-disc version that was released a little while after, to try and squeeze a little bit more of juice out of the pip. And the band kind of followed it up with a tour. They played a number of shows. I saw them twice at the Brixton Academy in 2003, which was not the smallest R.E.M show I saw, but very nearly one of the smallest, because I also saw them at Hammersmith Apollo, which I think may be 100 or 200 people smaller. I saw them at the Royal Albert Hall, which is about 500 people bigger. And they played 2 shows at the Brixton Academy. Here are some bootleg CDs of those 2 shows. In the days before, everyone had broadband and every file could be traded and found just by typing into a search engine. These were the first shows I saw with the band with Bill Riflin on drums, and I think getting Bill Riflin on drums was an incredible choice. One of the best drummers in the world, one of the best musicians, also can play keyboards, guitar, bass, sing. He was a fantastic drummer, and he was, in my opinion, of the 2 drummers that I saw R.E.M with, Bill Riflin was head and shoulders, streets miles ahead of Joey Rawanka. Sorry, Joey. But at this point, I did start to get the feel that R.E.M might be seen as by Peter Buck as kind of like a lucrative side project that was able to fund all his other work, as opposed to perhaps where his heart really lay. The 2 sets at Brixton were vastly different. I did make the tragic decision at one point, as you'll see. Stipe is wearing a white suit there, although actually you can just see it reflects a lot of my CDs. But he made the tragic decision of wearing a white suit, which means at some point I bought a white suit, and I looked at it and then I realised that was a complete waste of money and I shouldn't have bought it. So this was the first time I saw them at Brixton. They played a number of songs that they didn't play the other night. And one of the nights they played, I think, 4 or 5 songs from Life and from oh god, what was it now? Fables, for the reconstruction of the Fables in order, which was quite a surprise. One night they played Begin the Begin, These Days Fall on Me, Cuyahoga, and I Believe, all in a row, which is pretty damn exciting. And one of the other nights they played Feeling Gravity's Pull, Maps and Legends, Driver 8, Life and How to Live It in a row as well, which were not very common. And these were some of the songs. On one of the nights they played Carnival of Sorts, which they hadn't played since about 1989. So the band were going deep undercover and bringing out some unusual and choice cuts. These 2 shows at the Brixton Academy were warm-ups for when the band played the Glastonbury Festival. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Glastonbury Festival 2003. No, it isn't. It isn't on the BBC box set, so I can't show it to you. But they did headline the Glastonbury Festival, and 6 or 7 songs from that were broadcast on television. They followed up the album with a number of other releases. In 2005, the Best of In Time got a release as a 5.1 DVD disc here, as well as a standard CD here, following the same format as the other CD DVD releases, which means that this is, by the way, is the only place I think you can get The Great Beyond, Bad Day, Animal, and All the Right Friends in 5.1. If that's what you choose to do. And there is a chap that's gone through and extracted the multi-tracks and then kind of remixed R.E.M. This is a version of the booklet, broadly very similar. Sorry, I just sneezed, which I wasn't expecting to do. The booklet is broadly very, very similar to the one that you'll get on the standard commercial release of In Time, with some 5.1 credits that's in there. And the only extra that you have, now you'd have thought on the 5.1 DVD that goes with In Time, surely you would have, some promo videos or something like that. Well, you get a Vancouver rehearsal of Bad Day, which is an alternate studio recording, which is the Vancouver rehearsals were also released online as a downloadable EP, and it had a number of extra songs in it, 6 or 7 songs I think from the period, and I can't recall what songs were on the Vancouver rehearsal, but I think Maps and Legend was on it and a few others. But you just got Bad Day on here, which is a shame. It really felt to be a shortchanging the fan base a little bit by putting just one song on there and 18 5.1 mixes. I would have thought, well, at least put the whole of the Vancouver rehearsals on, make it worth your while, which is why I didn't buy these when these came out, because these were like £15, and you got a 5.1 mix and you got like one extra track or something. The 5.1 version of Around the Sun, by the way, only has 2 extra live songs, which is not worth 15 quid. Yeah, the Depeche Mode reissues, by the way, they're the ones, they're the versions to go for. That's the approach they should have taken with this. So the band toured, as I said, 2 shows at Brixton, and they went back into the studio, and they released online, by the way, they released online a version of a track called Final Straw, a rough mix of it, which they started playing on the live shows, and that rough mix of Final Straw was released in 2004 on this book, The Future Dictionary of America. There's the CD. It's got a mix that's called the Move On mix, which is basically the version that they released to download from their website at the time in 2003, which clearly showed that a number of the songs from Around the Sun were ready and were finished, but the album itself wasn't complete. So I think they played Make It All Okay and Final Straw alongside Bad Day and Animal on the 2003 tour. They also brought back a song that they'd not played since the early 80s, a song called Permanent Vacation. Permanent Vacation did get an official release on this, the first official R.E.M. concert DVD, Perfect Square. And whereas the other 2 R.E.M. concert films, Tour Film and Road Movie, were stylised attempts at portraying R.E.M., Tour Film especially stylised, Perfect Square was effectively R.E.M. as rock stars. It was the first time this tour where I think R.E.M. presented themselves in a very straight, very traditional, very much we're 6 guys playing music on a stage kind of approach. So unlike the 1995 tour, which had some themes around it, and unlike the 1999 shows, which were almost a celebration of R.E.M., this was R.E.M. as a working rock band on the road. It's certainly presented in a very prosaic, very obvious way on this DVD. And it's a great recording of R.E.M. live, but it's not a great R.E.M. concert DVD, because the previous R.E.M. concert DVDs were stylised and frankly were better and had more approach. Around about the same time, we also got the release of the Best of R.E.M., the In Time DVD, which features replicates near enough the track list for the In Time CD, plus extra videos of Tongue, How the West Was Won and Where It Got Us, New Test Leper, Bittersweet Me, Lotus, and I'll Take the Rain, alongside 3 songs live at Trafalgar Square, a show which I didn't get to because I wasn't successful in applying for tickets. They also did an AOL session where they recorded 6 songs for AOL, but they followed that up with, and this is one of the things I'm particularly pleased about, promotional CD, R.E.M. A Joyful Noise, In Time with R.E.M. One disc is an interview CD, not that exciting. The other disc, the second disc on In Time, on A Joyful Noise, is R.E.M. recorded live in New York in October 2003, performing 6 songs. This is really good. This, by the way, if you're at R.E.M. headquarters and going, do we need to do something for Record Store Day? Yes, you do. You need to put you need to put songs that are live from 1995 out as a coloured vinyl, orange coloured vinyl 12-inch for Record Store Day. Then you need to follow it up with Not Bad for No Tour, Remix, and this, and maybe the Vancouver rehearsals, the AOL session and the iTunes sessions. But it's 6 studio recorded songs in front of a very small invite-only audience, performing 6 songs. I forget which ones, but it was very much worth getting. So if you get a chance, look this one up. In the middle of the tour, the band went into the studio and they did some remixing and some re-recording, and they then kind of released a remixed, partially re-recorded with new vocals and different bass version of Animal, which was a CD single. This, I think, was the first R.E.M. single not to get a commercial vinyl release. There's a promo 12 inch of some remixes, which I've never heard, but it only got one CD single. And at this point, CD singles for R.E.M., they weren't charting in America. The world and its focus had moved very much over to Europe. Europe was where R.E.M. sold more records, they sold more tickets. R.E.M. were bigger in Europe than they were in America, kind of like in the way that Bush, a British band, are inexplicably massive in America, and I have no idea why, because I listen to them and I go, they're awful. But somebody somewhere in America listens to Bush and goes, they're really good. Great, good for you. Please have that band. We were much better off having R.E.M. being a big band in Europe than you were having Bush as a big band in America. But R.E.M. had visibly shrunk in the eyes of the world. They were selling less tickets, they were selling less records, and hence they were releasing compilations. This is the vinyl repressing, by the way, of In Time from 2000, I think 2020, maybe 2019. This is a replica of the vinyl edition that got a very, very limited release in 2003. But this is the version that was sold at HMV, and it was pressed on gorgeous blue vinyl. Look at that, absolutely lovely. Absolutely gorgeous blue. And if you're able and patient, put it in your Discogs charts and you work lists, and eventually it turns up. This copy cost me £30 many years after it came out, which is probably pretty much around about the same as it would cost you if you'd have bought it from HMV on the day. But there you are, In Time by R.E.M. One of the finest albums, best of albums that there is, which of course was then superseded by album number 13, Around the Sun, coming hot around the heels and hot around the corner. So Around the Sun, the band finished their In Time shows, which was only 4 months, Europe, US, some big shows headlining festivals, and some not big shows not headlining festivals, some pretty small venues. And then they went and went back into the studio and finished Around the Sun. And I've always thought that Around the Sun is not their best album at all. I told you 22 minutes ago, in fact, that I think it's the worst R.E.M. studio album. I stand by that statement. It still is, because as I've said before, if you can be anything, why would you want to be boring? I don't know. But Around the Sun was preceded by the Fan Club single in 2003. Christmas 2003. Here it is. This is the Christmas 2003 Fan Club single, which features live versions of Country Feedback and It's the End of the World as We Know It. I think both recorded at Red Rocks with Wilco, actually, playing additional instruments, guitar, singing along, generally in a somewhat ramshackle fashion. God bless them. And they've then launched the album with the first single from the album, which was, again, 2 CD singles, Leaving New York. Now, some people don't like Leaving New York. It was the first R.E.M. single from as the lead track from an album that didn't chart in the US. It was bigger everywhere in the world, bigger in Europe than Leaving New York was ever was in the US. And you can kind of think a bit cynically around that and go, well, why wasn't it big in America? Because if it's calling Leaving New York, it'd be like if you had a British band releasing a single called Manchester is Brilliant, and then surely people in Manchester would listen to it. But I think Leaving New York is a song which is very much kind of dripping with, and it's kind of soaked in a huge sense of regret about what happened to New York in 2001 and the band's response to it. So it's got some very, very good lyrics in it, by the way. And in order to talk about the song, I'd have to go into the lyric book and show you those, but I'll do that in a second. Just to highlight, I think Leaving New York is an R.E.M. classic. It's one of the best songs that they've done. It's backed on one of the CDs. We Don't Go Back to Rockville, recorded in Oslo, I think, in 2003. And on the other CD single, You Are the Everything, recorded in a soundcheck, and These Days, recorded live in Toronto. Hang on. Sorry about that. I realised I'd started to get a runny nose after I'd sneezed earlier. I share with you everything, I'm afraid to say. So, Around the Sun had Leaving New York as the first single, and I think Leaving New York is a very, very powerful song. It really always reminds me of the end of a relationship, and the end of the relationship of mine, which ended where the other person made the decision that the relationship was going to come to a close, and I didn't really have any say in the matter. Um, it always reminds me of what happened when I realised these things. It's easier to leave than to be left behind, and it's very, very true. Because if you leave, you're the one that's making that conscious decision to go, whether that decision is forced upon you by circumstances or not. You're the one that's taking the agency to go. I'm going. That's it. It's over. Whereas the left behind, they're not the person making the decision, and that decision sometimes is a shock to them. It certainly was a shock to me when it happened. So it was easier for someone to leave than it was for me to be left behind, because I was faced with a situation where I was like, "Oh, we're not together. That's your decision." I wasn't expecting that to be the case. I wasn't expecting that decision to be taken, and you at least know that that decision is the thing that you think you either want or the thing that is best for you. Whereas for me, I was like, oh, I thought we had a relationship. I thought we had a future. I thought we had a direction we were going to go in together. No, we don't. And there's the concept around the thing that they did as well is the next line. It's easier to leave than to be left behind. Leaving was never my proud. Now, leaving was never my proud might be bad grammatically, but it reflects, I think, the truth of the matter, which is, saying, okay, making the decision to leave you, it's not something that I'm proud of. It's not something that I'm particularly pleased about. It's the thing that I had to do in order to survive the situation that I was in. And of course, the lyrics that are in there are very much around, what happened to me, certainly, is the things that they said. They said in all, some of which were true and some of which weren't true. Very, very painful separation with things which were done with the intention of, if they had changed their mind and they wanted to come back, is that the way that they had treated me would have been so cruel that I wouldn't have wanted to take them back, which I think is the way that I now interpret some of the things that happened at the time. The other thing that happened is it's kind of like a discussion around the song is a discussion around the guilt and the baggage that comes with leaving or ending a relationship. So there's the line, you might have laughed if I told you, you might have hidden a frown, you might have succeeded in changing me, I might have been turned around. Now, you might have laughed if I told you, oh man, what a line. Because remember, this song is song from the perspective of somebody that's made the decision to end the relationship. But for me, I think, and certainly if I was thinking the dialogue that I would be having with somebody is, if I told you that I loved you, you might have laughed at me. And I remember very distinctly when I told somebody that I loved them, and then they said, I know. They didn't say, I love you back. They just said, I know that you love me. They might have laughed. If I told you that I loved you, you might have laughed. And that's a terrible situation to be in, where communication between two people in a relationship isn't particularly good. Now, my circumstances were different to the circumstances that were in the song when I said that, but I always remember that. I always remember going, yeah, you don't, because you would have said something different, wouldn't you? And there's also then that line about, you might have succeeded in changing me. Now, if you go in a relationship and the relationship comes to an end and you come out the other side of that relationship, you don't go back to the person you were before. You go back to the person, you become the person that you are now that relationship has come to a close. So, from a point of view, the way that people treat you, and sometimes people can treat other people cruelly and dismissively and harshly, and that can change you. That can give you trauma. That can give you PTSD. That can make you less prone to trusting people, less open, more transactional, more when you meet people, instead of thinking, oh, that person's nice, you start to think, how's that person going to screw me over? What are they going to do to me? I have to keep my armour up, and I'm always reminded of the phrase, home is a feeling, not a place. And if somebody changes you, your home changes. You know, the environment that you're in changes. It's not as nice as it was before. And Leaving New York may not have been the most amazing of R.E.M singles, but I think it's an R.E.M classic, and it's one that really should have more attention and love paid to it. It's kind of overlooked by virtue of the fact that it's on R.E.M's worst studio album, Around the Sun. And this, by the way, was again, this was a special edition that was released at the time. It was quite expensive at the time. I think it was like £20-25. The R.E.M album that came in a box. And you kind of go, well, what am I getting for that? So you get 13 R.E.M songs, of which maybe 4 are good and 9 are not so good. But what you do is you get some fantastic, fabulous packaging in Around the Sun. So let's look at what's in here. So for each one of the songs, you get a poster and you get the lyrics. This is Leaving New York, and the poster is double-sided. On one side, it contains a work of art, which in some way kind of has influenced the song or the recording of the album, which is credited somewhere on here. This one is by Sam Seawright, and it's called Bible Leaves Detail, 1988. And then you've got the lyrics laid out there. I mean, it's a lovely bit of packaging, but you do kind of sometimes look at this and go, was Michael Stipe more interested in the packaging than he was in the songs? Not necessarily, but Michael Stipe was working in graphic arts, photography, and so on and so forth, and so saw R.E.M as an extension of that. The second track on the album, by the way, is Electron Blue, and here is the work of art. It goes with Electron Blue. What looks to be a photograph out of a plane. It is called by Wolfgang Tillmans, and it is called Auschwitz Interrupted. So, by the look of it, yeah, that's definitely a photograph from a plane of a place. And Electron Blue, by the way, was the second or third single that was released from the album. I'll get to the CD single shortly when I talk about that. But it's a strange song because a number of the characters which Michael Stipe sings about or sings from the perspective of start to repeat themselves throughout the songs. So Electron Blue is around somebody that takes a drug called Electron Blue that affects their perception of reality. You know, Soylent Green is people, Electron Blue is an R.E.M song. And it's a really good song. It's not an amazing song, but it's a really good song. And the reason it's a really good song and not an amazing song is because of the drumming. And that sounds very cynical until you hear it described in a different way, which is with Bill Riflin. R.E.M had one of the best drummers in the world. Very, very good drummer. And they had kind of squashed his abilities down so that it was a rhythm in a box. And you know, the drum tracks on songs like Electron Blue, Outsiders, they're very standard, they're very staid, they're unimaginative. Then there's not really, you know, a good drummer, you could listen to the individual drum tracks or just the drums on its own, and it would sound like a complete song with punctuation, with noticeable changes in style and shift and so on, and so it wouldn't be boring to play. Whereas some of these songs was undoubtedly very, very boring to play, and if they were played live by Bill Riflin, he had certainly more patience than I ever had as a drummer. And it's, as I've said before, Electron Blue was released. I think it was the final single from the album. Here's the 2 CD singles, by the way, of Electron Blue. And these are, by the way, close-ups of photographs of blue lights that are sometimes used in stage design, like a ribbon of blue lights that stand up on lamps. This one is backed with a live version of What's the Frequency Kenneth, because the world hasn't got enough live versions of What's the Frequency Kenneth. This one is backed with Sweetness Follows and a live version of Leaving New York as a CD-ROM track. Again, I think recorded on the tour, but again, it's a shot of those same blue lights from a slightly different perspective. Electron Blue is one of the good songs on the album. I can understand why it's a single. It's also a good R.E.M song. Not every good R.E.M song is, in fact, a single. And not every R.E.M single is, in fact, a good song. The third track from the album is The Outsiders. And The Outsiders got a very, very limited release as a 3-inch CD single. Here it is, which was given away to some people leaving the shows in the February 2005 UK tour. Just contains The Outsiders as a single song. and it's advertising the summer promotional dates there, as well as the 5.1 DVD issues of all the various albums. And there you are. Not commercially available, not available for sale, but a good R.E.M. track. And The Outsiders, here is the poster that goes with the... I mean, look at that, isn't that? That's a lovely work of art. That is Jules de Balancourt's Media Information Centre detail from 2003. And much like Leaving New York, The Outsiders has a sense of lost and lost worlds. It's like some of the songs sound like they're kind of made out of jigsaws. They're made out of parts that have been stuck together. The Outsiders feels like a natural, organic R.E.M. song that was actually played by 6 people together in a room, as opposed to some of the other songs. And The Outsiders has I hesitate to use the word rap. It has a rap part by Q-Tip on there. Michael Stipe has performed that rap live and on the iTunes version, which is far better. There is an alternate studio recording of Outsiders on the CD single, I think, for Aftermath, but it still features Q-Tip. And then we have song 4, which is Make It All Okay. Very cynically, Make It All Okay is a sad dad ballad. It's the work of art here is William Pinard, Limbs Number 2 from 2004. The lyrics, by the way, are on the back of these and they are they're great lyrics. They don't necessarily work always as songs, and Make It All Okay suffers, like a number of the songs from the album, because it's what you've got a sense of songs that have been constructed and put together as individual, discrete 5-minute pieces of music, not as individual songs. And you certainly don't get the sense that the band have sat together in a room staring at each other, playing the song, learning the song, getting the bits of the songs out, making the bits of the song work together. It's almost like it's a studio creation, and then they learn to replicate the studio creation when they perform live. Track 5 is, by the way, The Final Straw, and here is, this is from Spring of the Home of the Free, Spring 2004, by an artist called Rogan, not Joe Rogan. And Final Straw, again, one of the senses that goes through all of these songs is a kind of like a lyrical protest around what happened on 9/11 and America's response to that, and that traumatic response. It's an album that really is very, very tightly shaped by the fallout of the September 11th attacks in 2001. You know, the lyric like, I don't believe and I never did that 2 wrongs made it right, and if the world was filled with the likes of you, then I'm putting up a fight to make it right. I mean, again, it's quite an anodyne lyric. It's quite straightforward. It's a good lyric, but it's very blunt. It's very on the surface. It's almost drab. It's sincere. It's hectoring in some respects. It feels like an Oliver Stone film turned into a song. But that's what the times required. You know, living in that world at that time was really, really difficult. And track 6, by the way, is I Wanted to Be Wrong. And I Wanted to Be Wrong is I wrote a song called I Wish I Was Wrong, which was around my perception of what the world would have been post 9/11. So this piece of artwork is Camille Rose Garcia, the Deconstructionist Army. Again, it's a detail. This is from 2004, and it is. You know where I come from. You know what I feel. You're Yul Brynner, Westworld, reporting from the field. I told you I wanted to be wrong, but everyone is humming a song that I don't understand. It's not a bad song, but an album that's made of nothing but heartbroken funeral plays, dirges and ballads is a really, really difficult meal to digest. And then we have track 7, which is Wanderlust. Now, Wanderlust is effectively it's Rotary 9, but it's rewritten with a single, and Michael Stipe has been inspired to put lyrics over the top of it. It's got that same kind of what's the words I'm thinking of here? It's got a light, kind of airy texture to it. It's an insubstantial song, so even though it carries itself on the lyrics, and the lyrics aren't that great. In fact, the music is not that great. I'm trying to understand what it is. I mean, certainly it's very light and breezy, but it's like bubblegum. It's like candy floss. You get to it and there's no substance that's in there. And Wanderlust was released as a single, third single from the album. Famous photographs of astronauts on the moon. Buzz Aldrin said, "Fuck you, I've been to the moon," and he's quite right. This is backed with alternative studio versions recorded in the band's Athens rehearsal studio, preparing for the tour of Outsiders and I think Bad Day. And on this one, it is backed with an alternate version of Low, very similar to the LP versions, just performed in the studio in rehearsal in 2004. And we have Boy in the Well, which is track 8, I think. And it's a to me, Boy in the Well feels like one of those Michael Stipe pep talk type songs. So this time he's kind of talking about him receiving the pep talk. It's very similar to New Test Leper in so much as it's Michael Stipe writing from a third person perspective. It's tasteful, it's dull, it's boring, it's beige as a song. It's not particularly good. This work of art is called Houston and it's untitled. It's just a digital photo, presumably by Michael Stipe. It's not linked or stored to anybody. And then we have Aftermath. Aftermath is the last single on the album. It's also the second single that was released from the album, and it's got a piece of work of art called New Ways of Looking at a Future That Never Was by the author and artist Douglas Copeland. This is, of course, from a galaxy far, far away, a long, long time ago, kind of an abstract Lego version of an X-Wing, which didn't exist in 2004. I don't think they'd started making them. And Aftermath has a great lyric in there. It's very obviously a post 9/11 song. It's got a lyric around feeding the cat and putting the dishes in the sink and trying to recover from what's happened and how you cope with it. It's a really dense, interesting lyric. It's not an amazing single, by the way, but it's pretty good, and it's got one of the most terrible videos ever. It is backed with a rehearsal version of High Speed Train on this CD and a rehearsal version of So Fast So Numb and All the Right Friends on here. So that kind of fills out the CD singles from the period. And High Speed Train, of course, the B-side of Aftermath, is also the next song that's on here. This is a piece of work by Barry McGee. I can't remember the name of it, I can't read it right now. But again, it's an artwork here. High Speed Train. If there is a song that should be called High Speed Train, it should never be a song as slow as High Speed Train. It is a song that sounds like a train that's stuck forever waiting in the station, and it just reminds me of a rainy Friday. You know, it's like most of the album. It's an album made of songs like Parakeet, but not quite as good. And that Parakeet is not the best R.E.M. song at all. And then there's the next one, which is this song here. The worst joke ever. This is a character which Michael Stipe was found quite inspirational. He was like a burglar. Now, it's a really bad song, this. It's got an awkward, unfitting vocal. It's the sound of a band becoming unglued. It's a B-side, basically, that's been promoted to album track by mistake. And the lyric is apparently about a cat burglar looking back on his life after some regrets. Although, of course, it lent itself to the review that it is, in fact, worst R.E.M. album ever, as Comic Book Guy would say. Then we have The Ascent of Man, which is, I describe it as a banana sandwich lasagna of a song. It shouldn't be a song. It's bits of songs that have been put together and forced to fit. Like if you had a Metallica song that was made out of all the bits that weren't good enough to fit on the albums. And then we've got Around the Sun, the last track, the title track from the album, which is, yeah, it's boring. It's got an unearned coda. The whole album really doesn't have any B-sides at all. The band instead stuck the songs that should have been B-sides onto the album. Here's the credits booklet, by the way. The band should have really stripped Around the Sun down to maybe 10 songs, put Bad Day and Animal on it, taken about 6 songs off, put them onto B-sides, and given up and be done with it. And yeah, there you go. Around the Sun by R.E.M. Their worst album. Easily their worst album. I do not like it in any way. It always reminds me, Around the Sun, of I think an album by Big Black, which says and the Big Black albums are sequenced in the order of goodness, by the way, which means that the band put the songs on the album in the order of how good they think they are, which means the last song on the album is always what they think the worst song is. And sometimes listening to Around the Sun, I had a sense of every song on the album getting progressively worse as it goes along, which always reminds me of the sticker that's on the Headache album by Big Black, which says, "Not as good as Atomizer, so don't get your hopes up, cheese." This should have a sticker going, "Not as good as any of the other R.E.M. albums, so don't get your hopes up." Terrible album, really, really terrible album. So there's a couple of things I'll just quickly pick up. There was a live version of Man on the Moon, which was on a CD that was given away free with The Sun. The only time I've bought The Sun since the Hillsborough disaster, by the way, because it had a duet version. And there was the 5.1 DVD version of Around the Sun, which was released in 2005. Here it is, 5.1 mix, and it also has some live footage on it, being videos for Leaving New York and Aftermath, 2 songs from the St. James's Church, and a small EBK type documentary. Unexceptional and unamazing, I'm afraid to say. With that, that's the Around the Sun period, wrapped up in a nice little bow. I've run out of time, so the next time I talk about R.E.M, I'm going to talk about the live album and the various kind of live releases, which there were, which document that period. It was a good time to be a fan of R.E.M. If you like seeing them live, they played lots of live shows. I saw them 4 times, twice at Brixton, once at the Hammersmith Apollo, once at Live 8. And they were always great live, but they were not great on record. And that is why I think Around the Sun is the worst R.E.M. album. In a world where you can be anything, why be boring? Why be beige? If you're thinking that about this Notcast, don't answer. I've chosen to be this. Complete artistic control is important. But overall, I think it's fair to say that Around the Sun is by no means, shape or form R.E.M's best album. If you think it's R.E.M's best album, listen to more R.E.M. albums. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other. The next time we meet, I'm going to be talking about R.E.M's live album from 2005. Well, that's the next time I do an R.E.M. one. But I have plenty more records to talk about in future episodes. Stay beautiful, pet cats, give people hugs, eat healthily, sleep in. See you soon. Stay beautiful. Bye.